Hi there, this is Nicole coming at you from the website Loved and Listened To. Loved and Listened To is a website where you can go and find lots of interesting content to help you feel better and, of course, feel loved and listened to. I make content to help people live their best lives, so to speak. So that's content related to mental health, your physical health, emotional health, and mental health. In this first video, which if you're watching this, thank you very much for tuning into my very first video on this channel. In this video, I would like to talk to you about my personal experience with attending therapy. And I would like to start, my channel and all of the videos that I'm going to put out. I'd like to start first kind of telling my story and talking about some misconceptions in my experience that people might have with going to therapy. So some misconceptions that might prevent someone from actually seeking a therapist and attending therapy. So in my experience, some of the misconceptions associated with going to therapy are actually very negative, or they're based on pop culture, like things you might see on TV or in movies. And a lot of times those ideas about what it means to go to therapy or what therapy is going to be like when you're actually there, they are really fear-based, or they're very, for lack of a better word, they're very ignorant. And so hopefully this video will give you some much needed information about what it's like to go to therapy, at least from my perspective, which is what I'm going to share with you. Okay, so first, before I talk about some misconceptions that I personally had, and some of the misconceptions that I've heard people around me have, before I get into that, I'd like to first define what I am going to talk about in this video as far as what therapy is. So I am going to define therapy as a regular time that you meet with some sort of therapist that helps with mental health issues. So that could be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And by regular, usually, you may go to therapy weekly if you have the financial means to, bi-weekly or monthly. And I'm also going to talk about talk therapy, which is what I attended. So talk therapy, weekly or bi-weekly, is what I attend. And yeah, so just wanted to define that before I go on with the rest of the video. To give you a little bit of information about my personal experience with therapy, a little background, I started to go to therapy back in, I think, 2016, and I decided to seek out the help of a mental care professional after I received some physical health related news that really upset me, and I needed to talk to someone about it, but I was really nervous to talk to anyone that I knew. And that feeling, kind of like not feeling really connected with people around me, prompted me to do some introspection and to kind of look at myself and say, well, why is it that you are, that you have friends and you have family members, of course, but you don't, at that time I had not built really intimate relationships with people who were close to me. Intimate being feeling really comfortable with people to talk to them about what you're going through and things like that. So because I didn't feel that way, I decided to seek out the help of a therapist. And at the time, I actually only knew one person in my whole circle who attended therapy, and thankfully, I'm very lucky, but thankfully that person, I did trust that person enough to say, hey, would you please recommend a therapist to me, or tell me more about the process, or tell me how I can get started? And they were very happy to help me, and they actually had their therapist recommend a therapist to me. So that is why and how I found a therapist. There's also other resources online. One big one is, I know on the Psychology Today website, there's a listing, kind of like a yellow pages listing of therapists that you can search for in your area. But yeah, if you want me to make a video on like how to find a therapist, leave a comment below and I'll definitely get to that. But if that's not needed, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to bore you with that part. I want to get to the meaty part. But yeah, so that's how and why I started to attend therapy. Okay, so let's get into some of these misconceptions that we can all have, or that I had, that I've seen on TV. The first one, which I'm going to start lighthearted, the first one that's I was really surprised by when I first attended therapy, like my first session. I thought there would be a couch or a lounge, you know, like you can lay down kind of and get comfortable. But for me, my therapist, there was just, you know, like a comfortable chair, but just a regular chair. And the therapist also sat in a regular chair with notes and things like that. But there was no couch. And I was like, I have seen couches on every show or every movie I've ever watched. When people go to therapists, there's always a couch. Where's the couch? So that was the first misconception that I had. And just, I walked into the room and boop, that little bubble was burst immediately. I had to sit upright to talk about my problems, so that's okay. The second misconception that I personally had, and this is based on my personality, which is, I would describe myself maybe not type A, but definitely maybe type A minus or B plus, but kind of close. I thought that the therapist would assign me kind of like homework, like every week I would have to work on these really specific things. I thought therapy was going to be kind of like having someone guide you through almost like a textbook or a curriculum, something really regimented. And when that didn't happen, I was like, oh, what is this? Like, well, how am I going to like immediately get better if I don't have this really regimented way of approaching therapy and having tasks to do? Like, I thought the therapist would have me write out a checklist of like, okay, this week you need to work on A, B, C, and D. And then I would go and work on those things during the week or something. But it absolutely has not been like that. I'm thankful that it's not like that, because even though that's what I thought it would be like, I think that would be incredibly stressful to have another thing to do on top of needing mental health care. So I'm glad that that's, at least in my case, that was not the case with how my therapy progressed then and over the years. And even though I did not receive like checklists of things exactly to do, I can say that I have made so much progress. And for me, my personal journey has really been about gaining awareness of my behavior and then going from there. So the first step in changing any behavior is always you have to be aware of it. You have to acknowledge it. So my practice with therapy, both now and then, is to continue to gain awareness of why I behave the way that I behave and why things trigger me, why my relationships are this way, whatever. But it's just rooted back into awareness. So no checklists, practicing awareness. There you go. The third misconception that I had about therapy was about being fixed. So Brene Brown actually talks about her experience with therapy. And if you don't know, Brene Brown is a well-respected researcher, and maybe she's also a therapist herself. I will put her credentials on screen right now, but and she's actually from Houston, where I'm from. But she wrote about when she started to see a therapist. In one of her books, I will put that on screen too, but in one of her books she writes about when she started to see a therapist, she thought, again with the checklist, that the therapist would say, okay, do A, B, C, D, and E, and then you will be fixed, and then you don't have to come anymore. And I just thought that was hilarious. My therapist actually recommended that I read Brene's book, and after I read it, I was like, oh, it makes so much sense why you wanted me to read this book, because this is me, very like, things have to be, and I thought at the time, like, things have to be this specific way, and so that's not how therapy works. Like, you don't go and then you're fixed for life, because after you become aware of one thing, then something else will happen to you, and you grow more, you learn more about yourself, or you learn more about the people around you, and then okay, you get past that, and then like a week or a year or whatever later, something else will happen, another challenge that will help you grow. So, and it's a cycle, just keeps on going over and over and over. You're never fixed. And also, I did learn too to not think of myself as broken, and so the term fixed or done no longer applies to me as a human, because I wasn't broken to begin with, so I don't need to be fixed. And with therapy, you can stop going to therapy, you can be done with going to therapeutic sessions, but your work on yourself and how you interact with other people is continuous as long as you're alive, right? So there is no like one and done, you're fixed kind of thing. So that's a big misconception that I had, and maybe other people have too. Brene Brown had it. It must be very common. So that was a big one for me. All right, so the next personal misconception that I had is related to the stereotype in my mind that I thought, like, after I finished therapy, I would be like a Buddha. I would be always calm, never angry, never upset. I would just walk around in life like I was just floating on a lotus flower. I thought that going to enough therapy would create some unrealistic, not actually still a human type version of me, and that is not how it works for an average person. So if you want to really become like the stereotype, so if you've studied Buddhism, you know that the word Buddha doesn't mean like just the calm, chubby guy that we see on t-shirts or whatever. Like, that's not what that means, but this video is not about that, so I'm not going to go into that. But if you for the average person, for me, for the average person, this type of like super calm, never upset, never agitated, never annoyed, never blowing your horn in traffic, like that kind of person does not exist in just regular, normal, everyday life. There's a lot more of work, and I think maybe, you know, being around other people who have that same goal, like if you become a monk or a nun or something like that, that's where you could practice your way into being a super calm, never frustrated person, if it exists. But for me, and I think for the average person, you know, who lives in a city, who goes to work, who goes to the grocery store, who interacts with lots of people, you can definitely become better. I've definitely become better. I have far less frustrations and annoyances. I know how to now speak up for myself, advocate for myself in a different way, in a calm way, without getting super angry. But even after going to therapy, I have to say that yes, sometimes I still get angry. In different levels of anger, I experience, you know, most of those. I still have other problems. I'm still a human person. I still get demotivated. I still get sad. You know, like all of these emotions I still have. But when I first started to go to therapy, I kind of thought that all of the emotions that I had labeled as negative, heavy on the air quotes with that, I kind of thought that I would be able to like magically make them disappear because I was going to therapy. And it's like, no, that is not how things work. Even if you go to therapy, no matter what you do, if you are still alive, you still have animation in your body, you are going to have feelings and emotions, and that is awesome. That's awesome. Don't try to, you know, don't try to make them go away like I thought I could. Super wrong. Do I now have a better relationship with my emotions? Yes. Do I no longer dream of wanting my emotions to somehow disappear? Yes. I am now one with all of the parts of me. And sometimes those parts are not perfect or pretty or calm. Sometimes I'm a mess, just like everybody else, and that's okay. But the therapy has helped me to acknowledge that, and acknowledge that my relationship with my emotions makes me human, and it is also a good, my emotions are also a good way to build intimacy with other people, emotional intimacy with other people. So amazing. But the stereotype, the misconception of the, you know, the super calm stereotype that I thought I was going to achieve before I started therapy is a big old fat lie. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so now I want to talk about a couple of misconceptions that I did not personally have. These were not things in my mind, but these were things that I've heard other people say, I've seen on television, movies, and sometimes there's like just in general culture, how people who attend therapy, how they're viewed, or the stereotypes about them. So I'm going to address those now. All right, the first one, I hate this one. The first one, well, I hate all of these to be honest, but the first one is, the first misconception is, if you go to therapy, then you must be crazy. You're not crazy. You're not crazy if you go to therapy. This misconception is actually one of the reasons why I decided to keep my personal decision to start going to therapy, why I kept it to myself. I did not tell anyone for over a year. Only my friend who recommended my therapist, that was the only person in my life that knew that I was going to therapy, because I was so afraid that, you know, people would think like, oh my gosh, is she dangerous? She's going to therapy. She must have been through like so much trauma and all this stuff. And for me personally, that wasn't my story, but I still felt so much apprehension about sharing that I was going to therapy that I just kept it to myself. And part of that, you know, those apprehensions come from the kind of general ideas that, you know, socially we have about people who seek any type of mental health care. And I think it's very unfortunate that there's this stereotype, because if not, it's just less to get over for you to seek help. And if you want help, I think you should definitely try to get it, regardless of what you think other people will think about you, or what you've heard about people who go to therapy. So on that note, I'm going to share, in my opinion, the 6 things that I think this is not what therapy means. Number 1, therapy does not mean that you are crazy. Therapy doesn't mean that you are broken. No. Therapy doesn't mean, if you attend therapy, it doesn't mean that you have been severely abused. Therapy does not mean that you are somehow a failure. It does not. It doesn't mean that you need to be fixed in some way, like I just mentioned. And it absolutely does not mean that you are beyond repair. Okay? So think about those last 2. It doesn't mean that you need to be fixed, but it also doesn't mean that you're beyond repair. Think about those words. Here's what I think it means. 6 things that I think going to therapy does mean, in my opinion. 1, the first thing I think is that you have simply acknowledged that you want help to improve yourself. 2, you understand that people who are not related to you can also help you. So it's okay to seek help outside of talking to people who are in your family or in your friend set. 3, you care deeply about your relationship with yourself. 4, you care deeply about your relationships with people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, the dude at the grocery store, the valet at the restaurant. You care about how you are going out into the world, interacting with the world, and what you are putting out into the world. So if you're going to therapy, I feel like it means that. 5, I think going to therapy means that you are a seeker. So a seeker of knowledge, information, and experience that's beyond what you currently have. And that's a good thing. And the last one, I think that if you go to therapy, you must already have at least a little bit of self-awareness. It takes a lot of courage based on kind of the stereotypes that we've talked about. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-reflection to decide to go to therapy. So that's great. You already have at least some level of self-awareness. The second kind of pop culture societal misconception that I think that we all suffer from is, this was controversial. So if you've made it this far in the video, thank you. Don't get into a hissy fit about what I'm going to say. But I have heard several people of color say to me or just talk about therapy in the way that therapy is not for people of color. Therapy is only for white people. This drives me crazy. This makes me so furious. I actually don't know where this misconception comes from. I believe that all people, no matter what you look like, you deserve help with your mental health, your physical, spiritual, emotional. You deserve all of it. Just because you're a person of color doesn't mean that you don't deserve to go to therapy or that you don't need to go to therapy. You have a heart, you have an experience, a brain, feelings, emotions, just like any other person. So if you have this as a personal belief, I just want to very kindly encourage you to re-examine what this belief might mean to you, where it comes from, and also consider yourself, just to rephrase it, consider yourself as worthy of mental health assistance, because you are, you truly are, regardless of what color you are. And the last one, therapy is a waste of money. So when I started to attend therapy, and after the year later, I started to share with other people that I was attending therapy, one of the common comments that I received was, "Oh my gosh, that's a waste of money. You should just journal. You should just watch this show. You know, like, you should do these other things that I think you should do instead of spending your money on your mental health." So therapy, in my opinion, is the best money I have ever spent in my entire life. It's very unfortunate that in my case, and a lot of people's cases, it's not covered by insurance. So it is like having a very expensive gym membership or something that comes out of your pocket. But overall, it's amazing the amount that I feel better spending the money to go to therapy. It is truly worth it. It is truly worth it. It's not a waste of money. And if you're doing something that helps you to feel better mentally, and we're all living in what's going on in our heads all the time anyway, so if you can get some help fixing those thoughts and this stuff going on up here in your brain, what better way could you spend money? I don't know. So I say, if you can afford it, or if you can't, find some free resources or some lower cost resources in your area that you can use to get some mental health assistance. It's not a waste of time or money or energy. Very worth it, in my opinion. Okay, so those were some of my personal misconceptions and some of the misconceptions floating around in the American ether, societal things, norms, family stuff from your friends, those kind of things. So all of these misconceptions, I hope I covered a lot of them. If you have another one that you want to share, and you made it this far in the video, thank you, by the way. But make sure to leave a comment below. Let me know what misconceptions you've heard or experienced that I did not cover. Also, if you are currently attending therapy and you want to share a little bit about anything related to getting started with therapy, so how you found a therapist, or what your initial thoughts were, your personal misconceptions, your surprises, your triumphs. If you want to share any of those, make sure to leave a comment down below. I would love to read your comment. So finally, in the spirit of acknowledging how much I have personally learned from my journey in going to therapy, I'm going to leave you with a quote from the late and very wise Dr. Maya Angelou. And that quote is, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." I could not have said it better myself. So until next time, my friends, thank you again for watching. And I want you to know that I deeply wish that you may feel loved and listened to today, tomorrow, and for the rest of your journey. Take care.